Luke chapter 20. One day, as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple courts and proclaiming the good news, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, together with the elders, came up to him. "Tell us by what authority you are doing these things," they said. "Who gave you this authority?" He replied, "I will also ask you a question. Tell me, John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin?" They discussed it among themselves and said, "If we say from heaven, he will ask, 'Why didn't you believe him?' But if we say of human origin, all the people will stone us, because they are persuaded that John was a prophet." So they answered, "We don't know where it was from." Jesus said, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." He went on to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard, rented it to some farmers, and went away for a long time. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants so they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. He sent another servant, but that one also they beat and treated shamefully and sent away empty-handed. He sent still a third, and they wounded him and threw him out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I will send my son whom I love. Perhaps they will respect him." But when the tenants saw him, they talked the matter over. "This is the heir," they said. "Let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, they said, "God forbid!" Jesus looked directly at them and asked, "Then what is the meaning of that which is written? 'The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.' Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed." The teachers of the law and the chief priests looked for a way to arrest him immediately, because they knew he had spoken this parable against them. But they were afraid of the people. Keeping a close watch on him, they sent spies who pretended to be sincere. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said, so that they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. So the spies questioned him. "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" He saw through their duplicity and said to them, "Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription are on it?" "Caesar's," they replied. He said to them, "Then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." They were unable to trap him in what he had said there in public, and astonished by his answer, they became silent. Some of the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus with a question. "Teacher," they said, "Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife but no children, the man must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now, there were 7 brothers. The first one married a woman and died childless. The second and then the third married her, and in the same way the 7 died, leaving no children. Finally, the woman died too. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since the 7 were married to her?" Jesus replied, "The people of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they can no longer die, for they are like the angels. They are God's children, since they are children of the resurrection. But in the account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise, for he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive." Some of the teachers of the law responded, "Well said, teacher," and no one dared to ask him any more questions. Then Jesus said to them, "Why is it said that the Messiah is the son of David? David himself declares in the book of Psalms, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet.' David calls him Lord. How then can he be his son?" While all the people were listening, Jesus said to his disciples, "Beware of the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely.
Good morning. As we begin chapter 20, we're now in the week leading up to Jesus' crucifixion. Jesus had entered into Jerusalem with the crowds praising his name, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And we hear the Pharisees didn't like that too much. So Jesus comes in on the Sunday of that week, getting praised and really worshipped by the people, hailed as a king. And then on the Monday, he enters the temple, turns over tables, and chases the people out. And the Pharisees didn't like that. And at the end of chapter 19, we see what they want to do. Every day he was teaching at the temple, but the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the leaders among the people were trying to kill him. Yet they could not find a way to do it, because all the people hung on his words. The events we get to today in chapter 20 take place on the Tuesday of that week. Jesus was welcomed on the Sunday. He clears the temple on the Monday. And on the Tuesday, he's back in the temple again teaching the people. And this is one of the last times that Jesus is going to be in front of a mass of people before his crucifixion. What does he want to leave the people with? What does Luke, as the author, want us to take away from this passage? That's what I want our focus to be here. What is so important that right before Jesus is going to go to the cross, he wants to leave us with these messages? We're going to look at ideas like authority. We're going to talk about life after death. We're going to talk about the Messiah. We're going to talk about taxes. Okay, wait a minute. It reminds me a little bit of the Sesame Street song, "Which one of these doesn't belong here?" It seems a little odd. Why would Jesus be talking about taxes in the midst of all of these other really weighty issues? Why would Luke record it? Matthew, I can understand recording it. He's a tax collector. He would have wanted people to make sure they were paying their taxes, I would think. But Luke, why is Luke recording this here? We're going to look at that this morning and get into it in a little bit more detail. But first, I think it's helpful if we understand the temple structure and where Jesus is when he's preaching. Help to give us a little bit of a framework of what we're looking at. See, the temple is made up of multiple, we'll call them courts, sections. And as you get closer and closer to the inner courts or the inner sections, fewer and fewer people are able to go into those until you get to the core of the temple, the heart of the temple, where you have the Holy of Holies, where the chief priest was allowed to go only once a year on the Day of Atonement. So we have this one middle section where only one person goes once a year. And then as you go out, more and more people are allowed to be there. And where Jesus is preaching is in the outer court. The outer court is open to almost everyone. Gentiles were allowed to be there. Women were allowed to be there. As you get into some of the more inner courts, women were not allowed to go much further in. But where Jesus is teaching, everybody, almost everybody, is able to be there to listen, to hear what he has to say. And so we get this image of Jesus in the temple court, the outer court, and an area that may have held upwards of 75,000 people, a large area. It's the week of Passover. There are lots of people in Jerusalem. There are lots of people in the outer court. And Jesus is there, and he is teaching this great number of people. And you can almost picture it like a modern-day press conference. People gathered around. Jesus is teaching, and then we have Pharisees, teachers of the law, those religious leaders start asking some questions. And they want to trap Jesus. We know this. We've already seen it. Luke has already highlighted that the Pharisees are looking for a way to kill Jesus. So what better way to start than a question about his authority? Who let Jesus come into the temple and turn over the tables and chase out the money changers? Who gave him this authority? What a great question to ask him. Who did give Jesus this authority? If, when we were able to meet in the sanctuary here together, somebody had come in and started chasing us out with a whip made of cords that they'd put together and yelling at us and pushing us out, I'm pretty sure there would be a police call, and they certainly wouldn't have had the authority to do that. So who gave Jesus the authority? It's a good question to ask. But Jesus knows what they're looking for. The leaders of the law are looking for a way to get Jesus in trouble with the people, because the people are preventing these religious leaders from being able to put Jesus to death. They think he's awesome. He's a king. He's the Messiah. They believe that he has come to free them. And so they're looking for a way to trap Jesus and have the people look down on him. And this authority question is what they use. Tell us, by what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority? But Jesus doesn't fall for their trap. He turns the question back on them. I will also ask you a question. Tell me, John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? Now, why would Jesus ask a question about John's baptism? See, the people believed that John was a prophet of God, and the religious leaders didn't. So Jesus knew by asking a question about John's authority, he could put them in a little bit of a jam. How would they answer this? You see, John claimed that Jesus was the Messiah. Let's look in the Gospel of John, chapter 3. They came to John and said to him, "Rabbi, that man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about, look, he is baptizing, and everyone is going to him." To this John replied, "A person can receive only what he is given them from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but I am sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends to the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine, and it is now complete. He must become greater. I must become less." So John recognized that Jesus was the Messiah. The people recognized John as a prophet. And the religious leaders discuss among themselves, how are we going to answer his question? What do we say? If we say that his message was from God, Jesus will ask, well, why didn't you believe it? And if we say that it wasn't from God, well, the people will revolt. They're stuck. So they give no answer. They say, we don't know. We don't know if John's message was from God or not. And Jesus tells them that he's not going to answer their question if they don't answer his. But Jesus doesn't leave the question of authority unanswered. He starts to tell a parable, a bit of a strange parable. He talks about tenants who are responsible for a landowner's land. They're working the land for this particular owner. And the owner sends a servant to go and collect the crops for his rent. And when the servant comes, the tenants beat that servant and send him away empty-handed. And then the landowner sends another servant, and they treat him likewise. And a third servant, and they treat him just as poorly. And finally, the landowner says, I am going to send my son. They will certainly respect him. And so he sends his son, And the tenants get this idea. Well, if we kill his son, we will get the inheritance. So they kill the son. And we're left with this, well, what is the landowner going to do? Now, this parable was a little bit confusing to me until I got some more information about how Jewish law actually worked when it came to land ownership. If the owner of a piece of land died without having an heir, then the land would become ownerless by Jewish law and could be taken by other people. So these tenants felt that if they killed the heir to the land, that when the owner died, they would be in the perfect place to take ownership of the land themselves. And that's why they killed the son, so that they would be in the right position to take ownership. But Jesus says that's not what the owner is going to allow them to do. The owner isn't going to come and just idly stand by. He is going to kill those tenants, which I think maybe is a little harsh in our minds, but it's the action that they would take. And the people also thought, wow, no, he's not going to kill them, is he? But that was the response. The owner is going to come and kill those people. And interestingly enough, unlike a lot of Jesus' parables where the meaning of the parable is obscured and most people don't understand it, and later on Jesus will explain to his disciples what it means. In this case, the people understood what he was saying. The Pharisees understood what Jesus was talking about, that this was a condemnation of them, that they were the tenants, they were the ones who were mistreating the servants, that were mistreating the son, and that God was the landowner, and he was going to remove them from their position of authority and replace them with someone else, the Messiah. The Messiah was going to come in. That's who has the authority to do the things that, like, clear out the temple. That's who has the authority to come in and be praised like a king, the Messiah. He references it when he says, Jesus looked at them directly and asked, "Then what is the meaning of that which is written, 'The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed.'" The verse that Jesus referenced that says, "The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone," comes from Psalm 118. It's a passage of deliverance where God is delivering his people from whatever trouble that they are facing. It's exactly what the Messiah has come to do, to deliver his people from their sins and the burden of our sins. Jesus puts this up against the Pharisees who want to have ownership and control over all of the religious activities. And Jesus says, you're going to be broken against the cornerstone. You are going to be crushed by it. And when the Pharisees see that, they are all the more enraged. And verse 19 tells us, "The teachers of the law and the chief priests looked for a way to arrest him immediately, because they knew he had spoken this parable against them, but they were afraid of the people." So where do you stand on Jesus' authority? Do you submit to him as King and Messiah? Do you see him as the cornerstone of your life, setting the direction for where you're going to go? Or are you more like the religious leaders who want to be the cornerstone? You want to control your life and make your own decisions. That you pull in God when it's convenient, but that's it. When you set yourself up for owning your life, for running your life, you will find that you end up like the tenants in the parable, where you wanted to get the land, but in the end, you end up losing it altogether. So I would challenge you, where do you stand on Jesus' authority? So from here, we move to the all-important question of taxes. I mean, Jesus is going to be crucified on Friday, and of course, we need to understand, where does he stand on taxes? Why is this question even asked? What are the Pharisees trying to get out of it? What are they trying to accomplish? Well, for them, it appears to be a great win-win question. And for Jesus, it's a lose-lose question, because no matter how he answers, they think, he's going to lose. If he says, oh, no, you shouldn't pay taxes, then the Pharisees and the teachers and the leaders of the law will say, oh, the Roman government is going to be very interested in that information. And hopefully, in their minds, the Roman government will take care of their Jesus problem, because they'll say Jesus is leading a revolt. If Jesus says, well, do pay your taxes, people don't really like to pay taxes, and this will turn the people against Jesus, because they think that there's a Messiah coming, that Jesus is this Messiah coming, and he is going to break the bonds of Roman rule. They will no longer have to pay taxes. So the Pharisees see this as, there is no way for Jesus to answer this well. There is no way for Jesus to come out of this unscathed. But of course, Jesus understands their thoughts. He knows what they're trying to do, and he catches them in their own game. And not only that, we're going to see that he completely turns this question around on its head. He saw their duplicity and said to them, show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription are on it? Caesar's, they replied. He said to them, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. What an amazing answer. See, and what I find so wonderful about this answer is Jesus doesn't just answer the tax question. He doesn't just say, who's on this denarius? Oh, it's Caesar. Well, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. He adds onto it a wonderful phrase, and give to God what is God's. It begs the question, what is God's? It asks us to ask it. Well, what is God's? We could start by saying everything is God's. God owns everything. Everything in the world belongs to God. But that, I don't believe, is what Jesus is focusing on here. You see, the denarius that Jesus asked to look at bore the image of Caesar. And so it was what bore the image of Caesar that belonged to Caesar. So what bears God's image? Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. We bear the image of God. We are to be given back to God because we belong to him. His image is on us. In this small statement, Jesus reminds us of two hugely important facts. The first is that we bear God's image. All of us, each and every person that's made, bears God's image. Which is why it is so bad when we treat people poorly, when we disrespect people. We are disrespecting people made in God's image. It's interesting when you look at how God describes us and the closeness that he talks about when he created us. Psalm 139 tells us, God created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I don't know if you've ever watched anyone knit. Kimberly is knitting right now as she watches me preach. and I can see her. And it's amazing because the knitter's hands touch each and every stitch as they're put together. God's fingerprints are all over us because he has touched each and every stitch that puts us together. As we were created, he uniquely placed his image on us as he knit us together. What a wonderfully encouraging statement to be reminded of, especially as we look at the week that Jesus was going to be crucified. This reminder of the importance of who we are, that we bear God's image, that we belong to him. And that's the second point. We belong to God. Is that how you're living your life? Is that how I live my life? That I belong to God? Kimberly and I teach our kids that when you borrow something that belongs to somebody else to use it, you need to take extra good care of it. We wouldn't want anything to happen to something that was borrowed while it's in our care. It would be upsetting. So we take extra good care of it. We watch it extra carefully. Do you do that with your life? Or do you feel that your life is your own and you can do whatever you want with it? And it doesn't matter because it's yours. And if you make a mess, then it's your mess and you'll have to clean it up. But it's not true. Our lives belong to God. Our value is set by God. He's placed his image on us, and we belong to him. And in one short statement, Jesus reminds us of those two beautiful truths. And such an important time as he leaves us with that idea that we are in his image and that we belong to him. And so, not being able to trap Jesus with this question about taxes and not being able to trap Jesus with this question about authority, we now get to a group of Sadducees. And the group of Sadducees were religious leaders, but they didn't believe that there was a resurrection. And so they used this kind of gotcha questions scenario because it took some information out of the Mosaic law and then make some assumptions about the afterlife. And Jesus is now going to have to respond to this. So what do they say? They talk about this scenario where this woman is married to a man and they don't have any kids. And so when her husband dies, it is a responsibility of her husband's brother to marry her in order to keep his inheritance going, the brother's inheritance. And so the Sadducees said, what happens if this woman marries one brother and he doesn't leave an heir, and then another, and then another, and then another, and they go through his seven brothers, none of them leave an heir. Who is she going to be married to in heaven? See, it doesn't make sense. We don't know. What's your answer, Jesus? And Jesus, again, dismantles the question and gives us wonderful truth, not only about heaven, but more than that, confirming that there is a resurrection. So what does Jesus say first? First of all, he says, you don't understand the afterlife. You don't understand what heaven is going to be like. There isn't going to be any marriage in heaven. So Jesus corrects this idea. And it's important that we understand that our ideas about heaven, well, there are some that come out of Scripture. We can sometimes put our own thoughts and ideas, assumptions about what heaven is going to be like. My daughter Leah views heaven as an endless all-you-can-eat sushi buffet, where you never get full, there is always more sushi to eat. Wonderful idea, isn't it? Kimberly views heaven as an endless warehouse of yarn with, as many colors as you can imagine and probably some that you can't. And it's premium yarn, not cheap yarn. My son Adam views heaven as, there are no Wi-Fi dead zones. Everywhere you get full signal strength. And we have these ideas of what heaven is actually like. But really, heaven is going to be so much more than we could possibly imagine here. And we have to be careful that we don't make theological assumptions on what heaven will be like that taint our view, like the Sadducees did. They assumed that there was marriage in heaven, and it then, because of that assumption, supported their view, well, it doesn't make sense that there would be a heaven because this issue would arise. And so Jesus corrects the issue, but he does more than that. He doesn't just correct this issue on marriage. He confirms that there is an afterlife. He challenges them when he goes back to Moses, who had set that law in place, and says, "But in the account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise. For he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. For to him all are alive." So Jesus shows that God is not a God of the dead. He's a God of the living. That even when we die in this life, it's not the end. It goes on. There is an afterlife. There is a resurrection. What a wonderful message to leave days before Jesus will be crucified. What a wonderful reminder that even though in a few days Jesus will die on a cross, that resurrection is real and it's true and it exists. That one day we'll be resurrected too. And our choice about what happens during that resurrection is made now, while we're here, based on who we believe Jesus to be. The Sadducees were silenced. They didn't know how to answer Jesus anymore. The Pharisees said that Jesus did a good job in answering because they believed in a resurrection. And finally they felt like, well, at least Jesus said something that we agree with. But Jesus challenges them again on who the Messiah is. Because days away from his crucifixion, Jesus knows he needs people to understand, he wants people to understand who the Messiah really is. And he asks the question, why does David call the Messiah Lord? Jesus quotes the first verse of Psalm 110, where David is making this statement that the Messiah is his Lord. Even at that time, at the time of Jesus, this verse was believed to be about the Messiah. And so Jesus says the Messiah must be someone who is greater than David, because David would not have referred to his own son as Lord. That's just not how he would have talked. So Jesus is showing who is the Messiah, whose son is the Messiah. And it has to be the Son of God. Jesus is challenging us. Who do we believe the Messiah to be? Just another person? Why would David have made this statement? Or God, the Son of God, come to earth to save us, to redeem his people. So Jesus closes off with a warning against listening to the teachers of the law. He highlights that their focus is about themselves. They want to be the cornerstone. They want to be the center. They want to have the authority. But instead, people need to recognize that Jesus has the authority. Jesus is the Messiah who has come. From anybody else, it would be pure arrogance to make a statement like that. But if Jesus truly is the Messiah, if he truly has the authority, then we need to recognize it. We need to see who he is, recognize who he is. So this morning I want to challenge you. What are you going to do with Jesus? Do you recognize Jesus as an authority, as your cornerstone, who directs your whole life, who you follow and give yourself up to? Is that who Jesus is in your life? Do you view yourself as bearing the image of God? That you are owned by God, you belong to God? Do you give yourself to God each day? Do you recognize that our lives here on earth are not the end? When we die, there is an eternal life, and we have the choice. Do we want to spend that life with God or without God? And that choice hinges on who we believe the Messiah to be. Is Jesus your Messiah? Have you given your life to him? I want to leave you with that challenge. What are you going to do with Jesus?